Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cracking open a really significant story unfolding in Florida. It's a major legal and political fight. You've got local governments squaring off against the state legislature, and it's all about who controls growth, planning, and maybe most importantly, who pays for the infrastructure needed for that growth. Our main source here is a report, a strategic document from St. Johns County. And they don't mince words. They call this whole situation an unprecedented assault on local democracy. The flashpoint, a single piece of state legislation, Senate Bill 180, SB 180. So our mission today is to really get inside this. We need to unpack the alleged constitutional problems, the sort of stealth tactics reportedly used to pass it, and what the state overreach means financially, specifically for you, the citizen voter.
Right. What we're looking at here isn't just, a simple policy disagreement. This goes right to the heart of Florida's home rule principle.
Home rule, that's the idea that local communities get to manage their own affairs, right?
Exactly. It's their constitutional right to decide local issues, zoning, traffic, and, critically, how development gets financed. And the sources suggest there's a deliberate push to weaken that local power. We need to look at not just what SB 180 does, but also how it allegedly got passed, almost under the radar. And importantly, the massive coalition, we're talking over 20 cities and counties that's now mobilizing against it, they see it as a genuine emergency.
Okay, let's start locally then, in St. Johns County. They're already feeling the heat from this bill. Two immediate, really big threats under SB 180. First, their comprehensive plan got rejected by the state. And think about the effort involved here. This wasn't a quick job. They spent 6 years on this plan, starting back in 2019. Countless public meetings, planning experts, citizen input.
A huge local investment of time and resources.
Exactly. And then the Florida Department of Commerce just dismisses it, declares it too restrictive under SB 180. Locals see this as a direct attack on their ability to manage growth responsibly, protect their environment, and, frankly, respect the democratic process they followed for years.
Yeah, it's essentially state bureaucracies saying no to years of local democratic work. And the justification, too restrictive. That's the key phrase under SB 180. The state communities.
Which is a huge power shift away from local control, right?
Absolutely. From the county commission meeting room straight to Tallahassee.
And the timing here is fascinating. Just before the state invalidated their plan, St. Johns County took a pretty bold defensive action. The county commission voted unanimously to shore up their finances, specifically regarding growth. They went after impact fees. These are the fees developers pay to help cover the costs of new infrastructure, roads, schools, parks needed because of their projects.
So making new growth pay for itself.
Precisely. They raised existing impact fees by 50%, hitting the state maximum. They also got rid of a big subsidy, a 40% discount that non-residential developers used to get, and they added something new, a conservation impact fee to fund land preservation.
And it's important to note this wasn't just anti-development across the board. The sources point out they included a substantial waiver, 50% off these new fees, specifically for affordable housing projects.
Ah, okay. So targeting projects for folks under 80% of the area median income.
Right. It shows they were trying to balance things, make development pay its way, but also encourage needed affordable housing.
So they take these proactive, seemingly balanced steps. What happens then? Is SB 180 already looming over this?
That's the core problem. SB 180 acts like a giant stop sign for exactly this kind of local initiative. Their entire effort to raise impact fees, which was designed, as one commissioner put it, to ensure new growth pays its way and does not burden those who have already paid.
Which sounds perfectly reasonable.
It does. But that entire effort is now under threat of being invalidated by the state because of SB 180. By blocking these fees, the state is effectively shifting the cost burden
From developers.
to existing residents and taxpayers. You end up subsidizing new development whether you want to or not. That's how this alleged constitutional issue becomes a direct hit to your wallet.
Okay, let's really dig into SB 180 now. How did one law suddenly get this much power to override local plans and funding across Florida? This is where the allegations of, well, legislative stealth come in. It's pretty remarkable if true. The St. Johns County report claims the most damaging parts of SB 180, the parts restricting local planning, were tacked onto the bill very late in the process.
That's the last minute, yeah.
With little or no proper legislative review in committee and minimal public notice.
Which is a classic tactic, frankly, if you want to slip something controversial through. It means lawmakers might have voted on it without fully grasping the huge impact it would have on local governments.
And the bill itself wasn't originally about local planning at all, right?
No. Ostensibly, it was an emergency management bill. which leads directly to the first major constitutional challenge they're raising.
Right, the single subject rule violation. I remember reading about this. The Florida Constitution says a law should basically stick to one subject.
Correct. It has to embrace but one subject. Think of it as truth in advertising for legislation.
So a bill about, say, hurricane preparedness shouldn't suddenly also include sweeping changes to land use law for the whole state.
That's the argument. The sources allege SB180 improperly combines emergency management with these unrelated, far-reaching restrictions on local planning. Two different subjects jammed into one bill.
And that allows these power grabs to potentially fly under the radar.
Exactly. And look how cleverly or cynically, depending on your view, they allegedly gave it statewide reach. How does an emergency management bill apply to almost every county?
How?
Because its restrictions kick in for any county under a federal disaster declaration.
Which in Florida, with hurricanes and other events, is pretty much everywhere, eventually.
Well, almost perpetually, yes. So a supposedly limited emergency bill gets this massive ongoing statewide scope. It's a backdoor way to suspend home rule everywhere.
Okay, so that connects to the second major alleged violation, the home rule powers violation. This is the big one, right? Article 8 of the Constitution guarantees local self-government.
It is the big one. SB 180 is described in the documents as an unprecedented attack on those powers. It basically puts local democracy on hold for 3 years.
3 years? How?
It prohibits local governments from making any changes to their comprehensive plans that are more restrictive or burdensome than what was in place before. And that freeze lasts until October 1st, 2027.
Wow. So for 3 years, a local community facing, say, new traffic congestion or environmental threats can't tighten its rules.
Correct. 3 years of planning paralysis. They can't react effectively to changing local needs, can't strengthen wetland protections, can't require better stormwater management, can't adjust road plans for new growth pattern.
While development continues under the old, potentially outdated rules.
Exactly. That's why home rule isn't some abstract concept. It affects your daily life, your commute, your environment, your property taxes.
Okay, and there's a third alleged constitutional problem.
Yes, due process. The law has a retroactive effective date, August 1st, 2024.
Meaning?
Meaning actions local governments took before SB 180 was even finalized. Actions that were perfectly legal at the time.
Like St. Johns County appointing those impact fee studies.
Precisely. Those actions could now be invalidated after the fact because the state changed the rules later.
That seems fundamentally unfair. It undermines any sense of stability or predictability in law.
It certainly raises serious due process questions. Rule of law depends on predictability. And, if you're wondering who might be pushing for this kind of local freeze, the enforcement mechanism in SB 180 is, well, it's quite revealing. The county report calls it a bounty system for developers.
A bounty system, that sounds dramatic. What does that actually mean?
It means the law gives extremely broad permission standing in illegal terms for basically any person to sue a local government over its comprehensive plan or land development regulations.
Any person. So a developer who doesn't like a local rule.
Or anyone opposed to local planning, yes. They can challenge it in court. But here's the really sharp edge, the bounty part.
Okay.
If the challenger wins that lawsuit against the local government, the law requires the local government, meaning the local taxpayers, to pay the challenger's attorney's fees.
Wait, really? So the state law not only restricts local government, but also forces taxpayers to pay the legal bills of those suing the local government.
That's exactly what the report alleges. It creates a powerful financial incentive for developers or their allies to constantly challenge local regulations they find inconvenient or costly.
That puts incredible pressure on local governments. They have to spend taxpayer money defending themselves against lawsuits that are essentially subsidized by the state.
Precisely. It drains local resources and discourages proactive planning. You can see why local officials are calling this an existential threat, and some imply corruption disguised as legislation.
Okay, given how severe this sounds, it's not shocking that St. Johns County isn't fighting this alone. You mentioned a coalition forming. What's the resistance look like?
It's genuinely impressive, the unity here. We're talking over 20 cities and counties, maybe more by now, joining forces legally. They see SB 180 as a direct threat to their very ability to govern.
Any big names in that coalition?
Oh, yeah. Heavy hitters like Manatee County, Orange County, Lake County, cities too, Deltona, Delray Beach, Weston, and others. from all different parts of the state, different political leanings.
That kind of broad opposition really says something about how this law is perceived locally.
It really does. It cuts across typical political divides. They all see this as a fundamental power grab by Tallahassee.
And they have a legal strategy.
Yes, a pretty clear one. They're filing a lawsuit, likely in Leon County Circuit Court, which is where state laws are usually challenged. And they've hired experienced legal counsel, attorney Jamie Cole, who apparently has a track record of winning these kinds of growth management fights for local governments against the state.
So they're gearing up for a major court battle.
Absolutely. And St. Johns County's internal recommendations, which are part of our source material, lay out their specific plan. First, join the coalition lawsuit. They authorized funds for that, similar to other counties, putting in around $10,000 initially.
Okay.
Second, vigorously defend their specific actions, especially those increased impact fees.
How? Given SB180's restrictions.
Their angle is clever. They plan to argue the impact fees aren't really land use regulations in the way SB180 means. Instead, they'll argue they're purely financial mechanisms, directly tied to objective cost studies, the actual cost of building the roads and schools needed.
So trying to define them outside the scope of SB180's freeze on restrictive rules.
Exactly. It's a way to potentially sidestep the main restriction.
Makes sense. But court battles take time. What else are they recommending?
Public engagement. They know they can't win this just in the courtroom.
Right, getting citizens involved.
Definitely. The strategy calls for a major public education campaign. They're urging residents like you to contact your state legislators, demand SB 180 be repealed. Also, pressure the governor's office and the Department of Commerce to reverse that rejection of their comprehensive plan and, fundamentally, respect local control.
So a two-front war, legal and political, trying to win in the court of law and the court of public opinion.
And emphasizing that this state overreach directly costs local taxpayers money. That's a powerful message. And if we step back and look at the bigger picture here, what this deep dive really reveals is, well, a seemingly calculated push to undermine local control, specifically over how communities fund the infrastructure needed for new development. Who pays the bill? That seems to be the core question.
Developers or existing taxpayers?
That's the bottom line. And this whole legal fight boils down to whether the state can use a law like SB 180, allegedly passed without proper procedure, to just suspend the constitutional authority of local governments for 3 years. This isn't just abstract political theory. This is about whether politicians are prioritizing developer interests over democratic processes.
And using alleged constitutional loopholes to do it.
If SB 180 stands, the sources argue, local communities across Florida lose a critical tool for managing growth, funding infrastructure, and protecting their environment. It's a fundamental shift in power.
So for you listening, what's the takeaway? This material really highlights how things like constitutional rules, the single subject rule, home rule, aren't just for lawyers. They directly connect to your local democracy and very tangibly to your tax burden. When these rules are allegedly bent or broken, especially using legislative tricks, it directly impacts your community's ability to fund schools, roads, parks, without hitting existing taxpayers harder.
The fight against SB 180 is, in many ways, a fight to protect local taxpayer dollars from being used to subsidize development profits.
The source material, particularly from St. Johns County, paints this as a clear battle. Local communities defending themselves against state politicians potentially influenced by developers and special interests. Now, considering the strong arguments about constitutional violations, single subject, home rule, due process, and this unusually broad coalition of over 20 cities and counties pushing back, it leaves you with a pretty stark question. What kind of political force, what specific policy agenda, perhaps funded by dark money or powerful lobbyists, is strong enough to make a state legislature seemingly undermine the fundamental constitutional authority of its own local governments for 3 whole years?
And maybe even more fundamentally, what does it mean for democracy when legislative maneuvers, potentially lacking transparency, become a standard way of making major policy changes that affect everyone?
Something to think about. That's all the time we have for this deep dive.